Madam Speaker, the Honourable President, wherever he is today, honourable members, this is a strange SONA to debate because large parts of the President's speech are straight from the DA's playbook. Let's be clear, that is a good thing. It's a good thing. Because what we need if we want to fight poverty is agreement of where and how jobs are created. And for the very first time, someone from that side of the House seems to get it. If we're honest, on Thursday night, the President didn't sound like a man leading the ANC, a party obsessed with centralized control of the economy and reliant on a massively bloated public sector. Channeling the DA, he said, and I quote, "Government doesn't create jobs, businesses create jobs. Government must create the conditions that will enable the private sector," unquote. But as we've seen today, what remains unclear is which of these views represents the real ANC. For almost 3 decades, this government has done about all that it possibly could to discourage job creation in the private sector through terrible, draconian regulations and labour laws. For almost 3 decades, the ANC has stuck to its ideological guns of putting government and the state at the centre of economic growth and job creation. And for almost 3 decades, it's treated the small business owner as the enemy, doing all it can to extract taxes and exhaust their goodwill, forcing them to jump through extraordinary hoops of compliance and regulations, BE, and a raft of other irrational requirements, not to mention the COVID regulations. And then suddenly, on Thursday night, we hear a different story. So what has changed? Now, Mr. President, I'm sure that you have seen and heard the analyst comments that you must have been reading the DA manifesto. But I agree with the Chief Whip of the ANC. But that statement needs to be corrected. Because a manifesto is merely a declaration of intentions, not achievements. Anybody can talk about what they want to do and the things that they would like to see done. None of the things that you appropriated from the DA came from a wish list. They are things we already do where we are in government. And so, you didn't borrow from the DA's manifesto, you took directly from the DA's track record. And that's a good thing. And it's also a very important distinction to make when trying to understand why this economy under your government remains trapped in quicksand. You see, it all comes down to the difference between talking and doing. And that's what we need to keep in mind when we debate the positive things that you said on Thursday. Are any of them likely to happen? So you talk about building a capable professional state, but you still insist on deploying unsuitable party loyalists to every single corner of the state. Meanwhile, the DA has shown you exactly what a capable, merit-based state can look like. You talk about solving the energy crisis and ending load shedding, and you've been talking about this for well over a decade now. But as we speak, DA governments stand ready to buy their power directly from independent power producers. You talk about making it easier for small and medium enterprises to operate and comply with regulations by cutting red tape, while the DA does exactly this. The Western Cape government has an incredibly successful red tape reduction unit, and we introduced a similar bill in Parliament only to have it shot down by the President's own party. You talk about paying government suppliers on time. DA governments consistently pay their suppliers within 30 days. You see, Mr. President, talking is easy, but doing makes the difference. And that is the DA difference. Cape Town Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis has promised to make Cape Town the most business-friendly city on the continent and put it right up there amongst the best in the world. You might also know that Cape Town already tops the ease of doing business rankings in South Africa. And this has had a profound effect on new investments, which in turn has spared its residents the worst of the country's unemployment bloodbath. But that's not good enough. The rest of South Africa cannot be the benchmark. It's just too low. Cape Town wants to measure itself against the world and wants to roll out the red carpet for every possible new job-creating business. And that's what we mean by the DA difference, the measurable way in which people's lives improve where the DA governs. Mr. President, you even acknowledged this DA difference in the wake of the Parliament fire, when you said, and I quote, "We do have one city that works, a province that works, and a government that works when the chips are down," unquote. The biggest DA difference of all is that we get things done. You talk year after year, the DA gets it done. It could have all been very different, though, Mr. President, when you embarked on your presidency some 4 years ago. You had all the goodwill and support that you needed to put our country back on its feet. It wasn't going to be easy, but you had it perfectly teed up. You were the darling of the media, businesses were falling over themselves to give money, and all you had to do was start delivering on some of your promises of your first SONA. Just a little bit of progress, and then a little bit more the following year, and a little bit more the next year. But the reality is that very little happened. And so South Africa's heard the same pronouncements and promises each year about how jobs are going to be created, how load shedding will end, how broadband spectrum will be auctioned, and how corruption would finally be dealt with. Every year, another task team, another social compact, another commission, another road show, another stakeholder engagement, all just kicking the can down the road at taxpayer expense. Now you tell us that your government has given itself, and I quote, 100 days to finalize a social compact to grow our economy, create jobs, and combat hunger, unquote. Now, no one here can argue with that. They're incredible goals. But what were you doing for the last 100 days, or the last 1,000 days for that matter? Our country's been in an absolute crisis for a very long time. And it's incomprehensible that you arrive at a SONA to tell us that you're now going to start thinking a plan. You should have used SONA to announce the plan. And not only the plan, but the progress on implementation. Don't say, do. And again on Thursday, you told us that those responsible for state capture will be punished. But if you'd read the first 2 reports of the Zondo Commission, you would know that you still continue to employ many of those implicated in your own cabinet. In your 5th State of the Nation address, you're still promising South Africa prosecutions, yet not one of those implicated cadres has been charged or convicted. Don't say, do. So while I'd love to feel buoyed by the newfound insights of job creation, small enterprises, cutting red tape, simplifying labor laws, supporting our nation's employers, I've seen this film enough times to know that this is where it likely ends. And so does everyone else, which is why the common theme of the media analysis post your SONA was nice words, pity it will never happen. After all that goodwill and hope 4 years ago, you have today become the president of the comforting catchphrase, the soothing reassurance, and the empty promises. Doctor, do nothing. But here's the thing, Mr. President. We cannot have a conversation about this inaction without turning our attention to the real elephant in the room. Or should I say the 64 elephants in the room. And you know what I'm talking about, Mr. President. It's your cabinet ministers and their deputies. 64 of you, including 28 ministers, 34 deputy ministers, plus the deputy president and yourself. Even after trimming and consolidating ministries, you still preside over one of the biggest cabinets in the world. A massive jobs for cadres scheme where no one is too corrupt, too lazy, or too useless to land one of these plush jobs. Every energy reform, every measure to unshackle our economy, every intention to support small businesses is going to sink like a ton of bricks the moment you walk in to your first cabinet meeting. Almost no one on your executive would be employable in the private sector. And frankly, you know that some of them should be behind bars. But instead of cleaning out your cabinet, you simply reshuffle the corrupt again and again until every single ministry has the grubby fingerprints of failure all over it. You stand up in Sona and you talk about building a capable state, but you're not prepared to walk away from the very essence of state capture and the incapable state, the policy of cadre deployment. Clearly, Mr. President, you know what I'm saying is true. You know that your cabinet cannot be trusted to get things done. You've effectively admitted that by now setting up a parallel state in your own presidency. Your appointments like Sipho Nkosi, Mavuso Mzimang and Daniel Manele to do the job of your cabinet says it all. In a functional democracy, you would have fired most of your cabinet a long time ago. But we all know why you haven't. We've seen the video where without a hint of shame, you tell the room that you would rather be seen as a weak president than split the ANC, because that is not your mission. Your mission is to keep the ANC united. In other words, you see your job as holding together this ragtag mob of crooks and freeloaders, even if that means the destruction of our country. Why else would Minister Bheki Cele still have a job in your cabinet after the spectacular failure of the SAPs to protect people's lives and property during the riots of last year? Over 300 people lost their lives. You should hold him accountable, but you don't. Why does Minister Ayanda Dlodlo still have a job in your cabinet? As Minister of State Security, the lack of state intelligence during and preceding the July riots fell squarely on her shoulders. You should hold her accountable, but instead you simply redeployed her to public service and administration, while the third person responsible for July's chaos, the Defence Minister, found herself redeployed as the Speaker in this House. Why does Minister Lindiwe Sisulu still have a job as Tourism Minister? Over the past 28 years, she's left a trail of mediocrity across 5 different departments. And if that wasn't enough to get rid of her, surely her despicable attack on the judiciary and our Constitution was. Why does Minister Gwede Mantashe still have a job as Energy Minister? We've now entered our 14th year of load shedding. There are children at high school who've never known a life without blackouts. You can't speak to the world about green energy and fixing our electricity crisis while Mr. Cole can't see beyond fossil fuels. Will you hold him accountable for dragging our country back into the dark ages? Of course not. Why does Minister Patricia de Lille still have a job with Public Works? If the Beitbridge border fence fiasco wasn't enough reason to sack her, then surely the fact that our parliament burnt down on her watch should be. Why does Minister Angie Motshekga still serve as our education minister? She's had the same job for 13 years now. During this time, almost 6 million children have dropped out of school. Forget about the pass rate that she crows about every single year. It means nothing when half of the children in our country do not sit down to write their exams. If our widening inequality is as important as you try to make it sound, that is where you should start looking. Why does Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams still have a job as Minister of Small Business Development? Her transgressions in her previous role as the Communications Minister and her flouting of lockdown regulations were already enough to fire her. So why promote her to this crucial portfolio, only then to appoint an outsider to come in and do her job? Why does Minister Lindiwe Zulu still have a job in your cabinet? Surely, when you saw her spraying people with a water cannon for the crime of waiting in a queue to collect a SASSA grant, there should have been no doubt that she's not suitable for the job. But there she is, still your Minister of Social Development. It seems like her and Minister Mbalula, just like every other deadbeat minister, are simply unfireable. And finally, why does Minister Ibrahim Patel still serve in your cabinet? If indeed you believe, as you said last week, that the private sector and not government should be creating jobs, why put a sworn communist in charge of trade and industry? A large part of our 46.6% unemployment rate stems from that. Accountability is something you only talk about, because actually doing something would mean firing some of your cabinet and upsetting your comrades. So, here's what's going to happen, Mr. President. Because you've shown that you're a president of talk and not a president of action, we are going to make it easier for you. Today, I've tabled a motion of no confidence, not in you, but in your whole cabinet, in terms of Section 1021 of the Constitution. If it's not possible for you to do right by the people of South Africa, then we're going to take the burden off your hands and let this House fire them for you. And once we've done that, we're going to bring back all of our bills of reform to this House. The ISMO bill, the Ease of Doing Business bill, our Red Tape Impact Assessment bill, our Public Investment Corporation Amendment bill, our Small Enterprise Ombudsman bill, and our End Cadre Deployment bill. And then we'll let this House help you do your job by implementing the reforms that you could only talk about. And while we're doing that, our governments and metros and municipalities across the country will help you do your job by becoming less dependent on Eskom, by taking over more policing powers from national government, and hopefully by taking over and fixing commuter rail. Our governments will be doing all they can to fix the mess that you created in our schools. And our governments will make it easier to do business and create jobs as we try to undo the decades worth of damage of your failed economic policies. Because we cannot sit through another year of your talk while our country slides further and further backwards and millions more of our citizens fall into poverty and unemployment. So, Mr. President, you can either stand back and watch us take over your duties one by one, or you can let us help you break the paralysis of your presidency by pushing through your own reforms in this House. I assure you, as I've done on many times before, that you will find a huge deal of support on our side of the House to get this reform agenda driven through Parliament. Mr. President, you may have just enough time left to rewrite your presidency and to build a legacy. But it's going to require you taking action, and action now. So what do you say, Mr. President, wherever you may be? Are we going to help you fire your cabinet and give your executive a new start? Will you let us help you drive through the economic reforms that are so desperately needed and which you spoke about on your SONA address, and which we know, as we've heard today, that your own comrades do not support? Or are you going to be content to see out your presidency and your term of office as the president who was too afraid to put his country before his party? That choice, Mr. President, is yours. Thank you.
Thank you.